I recently had some issues with folding rulers, and that got me onto tape measures. So check out the folding ruler video if you haven't seen that already. But this one's gonna talk about tape measures. So this is a Stanley Power Lock. It's just a really basic tape measure. These things are great for just having a bunch around. They're really cheap. Usually work well. However, the end is just a standard end which only hooks from underneath. I changed from that style tape measure to this one. It's a Stanley Max. And it's got a slightly wider end, so you can grab here, grab there, and the blade is slightly wider. Some of the stores around here don't carry the Max, they just carry the FaxMax, and the FaxMax is kind of the same thing, but just a much, seems like a fatter case, and just, they're blockier, so I prefer the Max. In my search for rulers, I found that Lufkin makes tape measures, so I bought one of these. I kind of mistakenly bought a 16-foot one. I meant to buy a 25, but that's actually kind of good because I needed a new tape measure for my workshop, and there's no way I'm going to measure anything that's 25 feet long in my workshop because, well, my workshop is 22 feet long. So, anyways, so I use a 16-foot in my shop. This one also has the big end, or a bigger end. And also in my search, I found these M1 Pro Tape, 25 foot. This one's sold by US Tape. This one has a gigantic end on that. Look at that. So they all have the little slot to hook onto a nail. They all have these little, well, most of them have these little ears that hold up. The Max is significantly smaller than the other ones, and that might be good because it can be hard to, sometimes you need to fit the tape measure into a smaller place. So in that case, this one's the best. But one other feature that this M1 tape has is, see, its texture. That's a rough, almost like sandpaper texture, which can be great for gripping onto stuff. And this Stanley Power Lock has a burr from when they stamped out the end, so that'll grab on a little bit. And the Max, maybe it had one, but now that's smooth. And the Lufkin is also smooth. You wouldn't think that that little burr on the end matters, but we got these Stanley Power Lock tapes as listers, for the border listers, and you're trying to measure along a house, and this end, well, you can see we put in some grip tape on the back of it, but this end was perfectly smooth and rounded, and you couldn't pull this tape measure out along the wall to save your life. It would just fall right off. So I think the one here, you can't even see it, but when they stamped out the end, there's a little burr here. And on the ones that they didn't round that off, that grips just a little bit and helps the tape hold. Whereas this M1 Pro Tape has that sandpapery stuff on it. So this seems like it's going to be a good tape. We'll have to see how it ends up. And this one also has a little scribe thingy. If you do, how does this work? Folds down, so it's got a little point. You can scratch whatever you're working on, or if you don't want to scratch whatever you're working on, you can fold it back up again. So that should be, could theoretically be useful. But I think this is a little bit big. A little lock thingy. This one's got a wire. It's different than the other ones. The other ones are all flat things. They all look the same, pretty much. So this one's unique. As far as I can tell, this M1 Pro Tape, sold by US Tape, is basically only available from their website. And their website isn't the greatest, well, it's a fine website, but their shipping costs are really high. So the cost to ship this costs just about as much as the tape, but I bought a few other things along with it, so that way the shipping wasn't as bad. One other thing that the M1 tape has that the other ones don't is markings along the back. So that could be useful depending on what you're measuring, because sometimes it's easier to see the back of the tape than the front. So yeah, and this was about 20 bucks. So similarly priced to the other tape measures I have here. To do the standout test, I strung out all the tape measures and then picked them up here. So carefully pick it up. And I did 6-inch increments, and I'll show you the results of all of these, how they came out. So the one that I was able to get stick out the furthest was the Lufkin at 11 feet, and then my Stanley Max at 9 foot 6 inches, and then the M1 Pro Tape at 8 foot 6 inches, and then the Stanley Powerlock Blade Armor 30 footer, that one was 8 feet, and then the standard Stanley Powerlock was 7 feet. Surprisingly, the 16 foot tape measure had the best standout. Let me change the camera angle so you can see why. It's a little hard to show on camera, but this tape has a much steeper curve to it than the other ones. However, it doesn't have this steep curve along its whole length. It starts at, well, it transitions between 5 and 6 feet. Let me bring it down to 5 and 6 feet. That's the profile. And then bring it down to 4 feet. See, at 4 feet, it's much flatter. That does have some drawbacks, because out at the further distances it's going to be harder to get the edge of the tape down to your measuring surface compared to the other tape measures. Wait, that's a good way of showing how much it angles. So, but out at further distances, that won't matter as much as way down at the end. If it was way down at the end, you get more freedom of movement when you're extended out. So I don't know if that's a good feature or not, but it's an interesting design choice that they did on the Lufkin. So now I'm going to do a test where I hook on the tape and then pull it out and see when it releases off the end. Because sometimes you're going to want to walk along a building, hook your tape on the end and walk along and pull it out. And if you pull out too far, it'll flop off. This is a pretty slippery surface. It's hardwood and it's got linseed oil on it. So this is like probably the toughest thing you're going to hook onto. Well, maybe not tougher than metal, but it's not an easy test. So in this test, the Lufkin was the worst, and then the Stanley Max and the M1 were about tied, and the Stanley Powerlock was by far the best. If you could get the burr to grab, in the end I'll show the burr in a minute. So there's the burr, you can kind of see it right there. And that makes the tape grab really well, but that's really a pretty flimsy thing to rely on. So once that wears off, this tape won't grab nearly as well as some of the other ones, or be the same as the other ones. But initially, it's good. This one has a rough surface, but smooth corners, so once it gets on an angle, these points just slip right off. But if you're on a face, it's grippy here, but not on the very tips. So yeah, not bad. And this one probably did have a burr at some point, but has just been used so much that it's worn off. So despite its name, this US tape company tape measure is made in China. US Tape does make some tape measures in the United States. I don't know if it's with Global Materials or whatever else, but their website says they make tape measures in the United States. This one, the Power Lock, says made in USA with Global Materials, and this Lufkin was also just plain made in China. I think the rest of the Lufkin line is also just made in China. It says designed in the US but made in China. So it's interesting that the USA can't keep up with new designs. Like this design, I don't know how old this design is. Probably 40 years old or more, 50, 60 years old. And it's been the same hook end, same thing, works perfectly fine, but when companies start trying to innovate and make something new with a quick turnaround, they go to China. So they make this tape measure in China and this one in China, and I'm not sure where this Stanley Stanley Max is made, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's China. So these are my 3 choices for tape measures. I'm not sure which one I like best. I mean, this one I've used a lot, or this style. I even wore one out and got a second one, so I know this style of tape. So this one is definitely perfectly good and usable, and it's been a great tape. So it's hard to go wrong with this one, the Stanley Max. The Lufkin, I like this one. I like the standout. I'm not sure about this end. It might be a little bit big, and it's also it might be a little bit smooth. I'm not going to be able to show you on camera, but that's really smooth, and it might slip off of stuff. And also the size of the thing. And same with the M1. I really like this grippy surface on here, but the size of that might be a little bit bulky for some of the stuff I do. But I suppose that's what my folding ruler is for. And as far as the scribe goes, folding that down, that could be useful if you're doing sort of rough measurements or repeated measurement over and over again. And I do like the numbers on the back. You can get Lufkins with the numbers on the back, so it's not really a fault of theirs.
What does that mean?
I don't... Hi, Robin.
What does that mean for?
I'm talking to the people on the internet about tape measures. But I don't think you can get a Stanley Max or FaxMax with the numbers on the back. So that's a drawback of these. Let's look. That one's 3 rivets and about 1 inch long. Let's look at the ends here. One advantage of the Lufkin, it's got 4 rivets and a slightly longer connection, so this end should stay put longer. It's one thing that happened. This is an old Klein, and the end on here is really sloppy, so I don't really trust this tape. I know it's supposed to slop to take up the spacing of this hook, but if it twists and you hook just on the corner and it twists, it's got to be off from versus pulling straight. So when I went to buy this tape measure off of US Tape's website, the shipping was something like $20, and the tape measure itself cost $20. And there's a couple other things I've been wanting to get, so I decided I'd get them at the same time and, combine shipping. So all 3 of these, it was just a little over $20 for the shipping, which is still a lot when you're kind of used to free shipping everywhere. But so I got this tape measure, and I've been wanting a new little torpedo level. This one is machined right out to the very ends. I've been using one similar to this, and the sloped ends are kind of useless. I'm not sure what the point is, besides maybe it slides better into like a tool pouch, but really sometimes I like to butt up against and level, and you can't do that because the end sticks out, whereas this one you obviously could. So one feature I didn't realize this level had before I bought it is it has a standard, plumb level vial here, and that's fine. You put it up on something, you see if it's plumb, but sometimes that can be hard to see, so they give you a mirror, and then you can look down at that vial. You can see the lines there. It's obviously not plumb now, but that's an interesting feature. One thing is this level is a bit heavy. I mean, it's not terribly heavy, but it's heavier than the other one, so this will add a little bit more weight to my tool pouch if I decide to carry this one. I also got this folding ruler. It's glass fiber reinforced nylon. It's a common type of plastic for building fairly strong plastic things. So this does not have the charm and style of a wooden ruler, but you can check my videos for my video on the decline of Lufkin folding rulers, and this thing is way more accurate and going to be more durable than the new Lufkins. So this is a good option if you like a folding ruler. And this is a Capro level. They seem like they make nice stuff. I haven't heard much about Capro, CAPRO levels, but this certainly seems like a good quality level, and some of the other level options they have also seem fairly intriguing. So this level also checks out with my Stabilo level. They both read the same, and both read the same. You flip it around and it reads the same. So seems good and accurate out of the box.